office at the University of Colorado Boulder. This webinar is jointly hosted today by the Interagency Arctic Research Policy Committee, IARPC, its Secretariat, together with the Navigating the New Arctic Community Office and the Arctic Research Consortium of the U.S., or ARCUS. And various members of our different teams are here today helping with this webinar. First off, as was just noted, we are recording this event and it will be offered for future viewing on IARPC collaborations. Our goal in hosting this session today is to share details on the planned update to the U.S. National Plan for Arctic Research. This session will outline the process for providing public input and highlight some upcoming opportunities to participate in some more focused topical discussions. But I would like to stress that this webinar itself is not intended to be an event in which input is being collected. So while today is not an opportunity for input, we hope to provide some important context and information about the National Plan for Arctic Research with the goal to orient you in your organizations towards considering whether and how you may wish to provide input. That said, there may be questions here today that those of us who are hosting this are not able to answer, but I know everyone will do their best. And with that, I'd like to mention for everyone the expectation that we have for our time here together today. And so, Tony, if you could go to the next slide. IARPC Collaborations, which is hosting us online today, is a community space where we aim to improve Arctic research by sharing ideas, learning from each other, and fostering our shared commitment toward advancing Arctic research. So we hope and expect that everyone on this call today maintains a respectful and thoughtful approach to our conversations. And that applies both to our spoken communication, but also to the questions and comments that we may be placing in the chat. I personally want to also recognize that many on this call today may be feeling a sense of instability, feeling that those of us in the Arctic research community face some new headwinds where the path might feel a bit uncertain. But I am certain that we all come today together feeling a strong sense of the importance of the work that we're doing collectively and individually to advance Arctic research and to meet the challenges that the Arctic today faces. So again, let's keep that in mind as we come together in a spirit of open and respectful discussion. This next slide is a brief look at our agenda. Maybe go back. So we will hear from Serena Stala from the IARPC Secretariat to give an overview of the plan and the input process. Next, we'll hear a range of perspectives on why providing input matters, in part by reflecting on past processes. So maybe if we go to the next slide, I'll briefly introduce our three speakers. We have Larry Hinsman, who is the former IARPC Executive Director and now the Arctic Professor at the University of Alaska Fairbanks. We also have Nikush Carlo, who is the former Research Plan Development Director and currently leads CNC North Consulting. And then we have Cheryl Rosa, who is the Deputy Director of the Arctic Research Commission. And so I thank all three of those of you for being here today to offer your perspectives. Next slide, coming back to the agenda. We then will hear from Audrey Taylor, who is the Executive Director of ARCUS, to talk about other ways to help shape this process. And we really hope to leave plenty of time for discussion and Q&A. And on that note, I would ask everyone, if you have substantial questions, please save those for the discussion Q&A period of today's agenda. And as you do formulate your questions, make sure to note who you would like to ask those to, if it is intended for a specific individual. However, if you do have clarifying questions or really brief questions, we can do our best to answer those in real time in the chat. So we'll move forward in that manner. And with that, I think I will now pass it on to Serena to again talk about the overview of the plan and the process.
Thanks, Matt. Thank you. And thanks everyone for joining today. My name is Serena Stala and I serve as IARPC's Implementation Director. I've been with IARPC for about 5.5 years, and over that time have really grown to appreciate the valuable role that IARPC plays and IARPC collaboration plays in bringing people together, building collaboration, and advancing conversations on critically important Arctic research that really impact all of us. And again, I very much appreciate everyone joining today to learn more about this process of developing the next Arctic Research Plan, and thank you for engaging in this process. Before we get started, I want to give some context about IARPC. I think many of you are aware of IARPC's mission and function, but for those of you who might be newer to the space of IARPC, IARPC is an interagency working group of the National Science and Technology Council, where we're tasked with enhancing research in the Arctic by bringing together federal agencies to coordinate and enhance their work. And we also facilitate conversations and build connections among federal agencies, researchers, Arctic communities, and others who live and work in the Arctic, both in the United States and internationally. And we do this by bringing together leaders from across 18 agencies, departments, and offices from across the US federal government. And we also run IARPC Collaborations, if you could jump to the next slide, please, which is a web platform that facilitates collaboration between federal agencies and non-federal groups and researchers with interests in the Arctic region. IARPC Collaborations currently has over 4,000 members, spanning many different disciplines, agencies, organizations, and countries. So IARPC was, next slide, please. IARPC was created in 1984 under the Arctic Research and Policy Act. And this act called for a comprehensive national policy focused on research needs and objectives in the Arctic. And every 5 years, IARPC is required by ARPA to prepare and execute a national Arctic research plan in coordination with the U.S. Arctic Research Commissioner, the governor of the state of Alaska, residents of the Arctic, the private sector, and public interest groups. And the work of IARPC and IARPC Collaborations is organized around this National Arctic Research Plan, which outlines areas for collaboration among U.S. federal agencies and researchers. And in the past, IARPC has focused more on the basic fundamental research necessary to understand Arctic processes. And in more recent years, IARPC has really built on this understanding to tackle some of the bigger interdisciplinary scientific questions that are needed, that need to support a thriving Arctic ecosystem and Arctic communities. So we're currently implementing the Arctic Research Plan 2022 to 2026, as well as seeking input on what the next Arctic Research Plan, which will be implemented from 2027 to 2031, should look like. And on the next slide, for some context and background, this is the framework of the current Arctic Research Plan. The current Arctic Research Plan, like I said, it's interdisciplinary, it's a holistic plan, and it really encourages collaboration among the many aspects of Arctic research. And importantly, it's meant to include research that requires collaboration between federal agencies and partners and not work that just one agency can do alone. So at the center of the graphic in the red section, you'll see the current plan's priority areas, and these demonstrate areas that are at the core of the current plan. They're Arctic systems interactions, community resilience and health, sustainable economies and livelihoods, and risk management and hazard mitigation. And the current plan also includes 5 foundational activities, and these are areas that really, underlie the entire plan and permeate everything we do. And these activities are relevant to all research, and you can see them in blue along the bottom of the graphic. They're data management, education and training, monitoring, observing, modeling and prediction, tribal consultation and effective processes, and technology innovation and application. And bear in mind that IARPC isn't designed to solve all the challenges presented in these areas, but rather to raise and answer research questions so that the solutions are ultimately pursued will be effective. And we also recognize that in raising the questions within these research areas, we must work really closely with Arctic communities. The people living there in the Arctic know best what their concerns are, where the good opportunities are, and what good approaches are, and have place-based knowledge that's critically important to incorporate into research questions and approaches. Next slide. Over the past couple of years, through the implementation of the current Arctic Research Plan, IARPC teams have made accomplishments through more coordination of research supported by the connections made through IARPC collaborations, new funding opportunities and awards by federal agencies, workshops and webinars, new research publications, and establishing connections and continued communications across IARPC teams and communities. More specifically, we've supported human health in urban and rural Alaska communities. Next slide, please. Investigated the impacts of environmental degradation on the Arctic. Next slide. Fostered community resilience in the face of change, worked to help ensure Arctic communities know what research is going on in their region. Next slide. Made connections to support better science and build future expertise, and supported better data and more effective processes. And if you want any information, more detailed information about any of this, you can find a high-level summary of some of these accomplishments in our 2025 report to Congress, which is on the IARPC website, and perhaps someone can drop into the chat. Next slide. So as we celebrate the accomplishments of the past couple of years, we're now looking forward to the next Arctic Research Plan and thinking about changes that should be made to best reflect kind of current and updated research needs in the Arctic. We're conducting engagement and collecting input, public input on what the next Arctic Research Plan should look like through November 15th of this year. And at this time, federal drafting teams will consider all public and federal input and come together to draft the plan. Once that draft plan is developed, it will be reviewed and cleared at the interagency level by IARPC agencies and then released for public review and comment. And this will likely be in late spring of next year. Following this public review and comment, drafting teams will again come together, review all input, consider all comments, and finalize the document. The Arctic Research Plan will then go through final review and clearance at the interagency level and be released in early 2027. So this timeline is subject to change, and we will communicate any updates to the timeline process as soon as we can, if and when that information is available and if changes do happen. And we will also communicate a more specific timeline for when the next public review session will be next spring. And on the next slide, there's a number of different ways that you can be submitting input to this process and to the plan. The first is commenting through a federal register notice, a request for information. The QR code on the screen should take you right there. You can insert your comment directly on the FRN website. You can also email iarpicplan@nsf.gov or send hard written comments to NSF, and the address is listed here. And again, perhaps someone can paste that address in the chat. And it's also available, the address and email, they're also available on the FRN page. For anyone, on the next slide, for anyone attending Arctic Circle Assembly in October, IARPC is going to have a session on Saturday, October 18th at 2:25 local time. And we'll be sharing information there about the update process and also collecting some input during that session. So if you're in Reykjavik, come by, say hi. We would love to hear from you and see you there. And then on the next slide, IARPC teams and communities are working hard to hold a series of listening sessions. We have a number of them that are planned and scheduled, and you can find information about on our website. And there may be a few more that get scheduled over the next coming weeks, which we'll also share by our website. But to run through quickly the ones that we have currently planned, the first one coming up is our data management and technology innovation and application teams will be holding a listening session on September 22nd. On September 24th, our monitoring, observing, modeling, and prediction team will be working with the observers, modelers, and field operations working communities of practice to hold a listening session. Community Resilience and Health will be holding a session on September 30th. Our permafrost community of practice will be convening on October 1st. And risk management and hazard mitigation will have a listening session on October 9th. Most of these are at 11 a.m. Alaska time, with the exception of permafrost, which will be meeting at noon Alaska time. And on the next slide, our final listening session that is already been planned. Our Arctic Systems Interactions collaboration team is co-hosting a listening session with marine ecosystems, coastal resilience, permafrost, terrestrial ecosystems, sea ice, and physical oceanography communities of practice. So a lot of opportunities to attend. You can attend all of these listening sessions if you wish. You can pick one that's most relevant to the area that you work in. And we'll be collecting notes and sharing those notes. So if you're in one listening session and you have an idea for a section that is not necessarily relevant to that team, you can still say it. We'll still get those notes. So please, please join as you are able. And on the next slide, as you're considering your input, we really encourage you to think about what are the critical Arctic issues and needs where federally funded science and technology research should provide knowledge to promote sound decision-making. And what are examples of research questions that address these issues? So you can look at the current Arctic research plan and suggest what to keep, what to add, what to remove, what to edit, or you can simply offer fresh guidance. And the update process is responsive to new and emerging priorities from the current administration. So tying input to these priorities, particularly and where these priorities overlap with the needs and interests of other stakeholders and rights holders, is encouraged. I think my last slide is coming up. If you're looking for more information about the development of the Arctic Research Plan, or if you have any questions, you can visit the IARPC website. We have a page there that's dedicated to the update process. You can also email the IARPC Secretariat at plan@iarpiccollaborations.org. You can also reach out to me directly. I'll put my email in the chat. And yeah, happy to talk through anything. Answer any questions if we have time, although I think, Matt, we're saving them, but happy to, if there's any sort of technical process questions, I'm happy to answer them quickly.
Any quick questions for Serena? Seeing none, I'll again mention that if you want to save your question, formulate it, we can come back to those once we get to the discussion and Q&A. So with that, I think I will pass it over to Tony to start the next part of our agenda.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, Matt. Hi, everybody. I'm Tony O'Boyle, a member of the IARPC Secretariat as well, the Director of IARPC Collaboration Team Activities, and I am here to help move us into our perspectives on why input matters section of the agenda. So we have three lovely speakers who volunteered their time to be here with us today to share their thoughts, so we are very thankful. And up first, we're going to hear some perspectives from Larry Hinsman, who, as Matt introduced at the top of the call, former IARPC Executive Director, so intimately familiar with both the plan development and execution process, to share a little bit about, not only why perspective does matter, but maybe some things, or input does matter, excuse me, but maybe some things to think about and consider as one is formulating any comments, input, feedback for the plan. So with that, Larry, I'll hand things over to you.
Thanks so much, Tony. And thanks everybody for joining. This is a great opportunity and an important time for us all. So, recently we've seen a lot of good signs of the awareness of the federal administration of the importance of the Arctic science. And one of the recent examples of that was the publication of the White House Office of Science Technology Policy's revised implementation plan for the 2022-2026 Arctic Research Plan. And that's changed a bit from the original version, but the emphasis of good science is still there. And so I think it's really important that we come together again and take advantage of this opportunity and really help make another strong plan. So I just put the link to the Federal Register in the chat, and so please look at that. That's the mechanism to provide input to this plan. This call today is not really appropriate. It's not really the time to talk about what should be in the plan. This is more about how to do it, and so we'll save your questions for how to do it. But we really encourage you to engage in your contributions of what's important to at that time to put it into the Federal Register, just to send it to Roberto Delgado by regular mail. It's nearly impossible to be so visionary to know what the state of Arctic research will be in 2027. So this is really your opportunity to provide that input and help set that trajectory. I guess it's Serena did a really nice job in summarizing what the current plan is like. And so, I encourage you to look at that again and see what's there, what was missing, how it was presented, what the structure is to try and build the coordination, the collaboration, the partnerships that we need to address those urgent research needs. So in your thoughts and your comments, please review the current plan and suggest modifications to the current plan that could capture the specific topics that must be addressed. And also think about the new research topics that you would recommend adding to the plan and whether you see those topics fitting into the current plan structure. You should also think about what should be kept, what should be prioritized from the current plan. And in the context of where our nation is going, what the urgent research needs are, and what other additions or changes, revisions should be implemented. Just a couple of oral notes. Keep your input explicit and concise. There's so much information that is provided. If you want to be effective, make it easy to understand, easy to interpret, and justifiable. That is, really provide justification why some particular work is urgently necessary at this time. This justification may or may not make it into the plan, but the writers of the plan must understand why some suggested work is important. You should focus on the research needs and research deliverables, but also tie it back to societal impact. Why is this important to our nation? Why is this important to the global society? Specific wording and language changes are certainly welcome, but they may be harder to incorporate than feedback on the overarching research topic goals. Tying any specific research questions back to those overarching research topics and goals helps put the request into the broader plan context. So the federal agencies review and revise this document and play a large role in writing the text. And so try and make sure it aligns with their priorities. So you may influence the actions and emphases of funding agencies for the next period, next 2 to 5 years. And when you are submitting a proposal to a funding agency, it's important if you cite the Arctic Research Plan, if it provides endorsement for the type of work that you want to do. There's really so much competition to get proposals funded these days. Such justifications in a federal document endorsing the work that you want to do should elevate your probability of success. And the last thing I want to say is that I believe the existing plan was very strong. And it was strong because of you and people like you and those working in federal and state agencies and the international community. And we need that continued engagement to make this plan also strong and capable of leading the research community in effective collaborations for the immediate future. So thanks for everything that you've done in the past for advancing Arctic research, and thanks for everything that you're going to do now to help us carry this action forward. And I'll stop there. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Larry. Yeah, and I just want to underscore, I think, a couple salient things that you mentioned there about providing input and connecting it to societal impact, connecting it to administration priorities, just helping provide some of that context for the input and submissions. I think just helps the drafters kind of think about everything very holistically. So I think that's a great point, as well as what you noted about, recording any changes or updates you'd like to see to the plan, but also what would you like to see stay the same or prioritize from what's in the plan is just as helpful of feedback for our drafters, again, so they can think about the whole plan and not just focus on what's new or what's changing, but what are we already doing that is effective, or that we want to continue, or that we still have work to do on, but we want to make sure that we give space for that. So thank you. So up next, we have Nakush Carlo, who, again, thank you for joining and providing some historical context as the former plans development director, very intimately familiar with what goes into creating a plan such as this, to help provide some context on where we came from, what went into the current plan, from incorporating input from agencies and the public, the research community, as well as the drafting process. So Nakush, thank you for being here and willing to share some of those thoughts with us.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm happy to be here, and it's good to see familiar faces and new names. Good day, everyone. I'm Nakush Carlo. I'm originally from the interior region of Alaska. So I was raised in the city of Fairbanks, and my family roots go back to the villages of Nulato, Tamna, and Rampart. And today I'm joining from the traditional homelands of the Duwamish and Coast Salish people in Washington State. I have been involved with IARPC for a while now. My first engagement with IARPC was in 2010, and then I led the development of the plan that is currently in place, so the 2022 to 2026 Arctic Research Plan. And I'm going to really focus my remarks today on why your input is not just welcome, but is absolutely essential to putting a plan together. IARPC has had an incredible evolution since it was established in 1984. And what strikes me most is that really early versions of the Arctic Research Plan were lists of agency-focused research, like what they were doing in the Arctic, which is a great first step. And then things have really evolved to more collaborative, more community-informed planning for Arctic research plans. And I think this current plan, we put a lot of effort into engaging beyond with the academic community, but also beyond the academic community to sort of restructure our approach based on what we heard and the input that we received. So we were really challenged in the development of the last plan, and we received input that challenged us to be more accessible in our language, more responsive to urgent issues, things that come up on a time frame that's shorter than a 5-year interval, and to be more inclusive of voices who have historically not been at these types of tables and have not been heard. So Arctic communities told us that they needed more research that addressed immediate challenges. So not just thinking about environmental processes, but how do we bring that information together in a multidisciplinary way to support decision-making that happens on the ground. And so what you see in the current plan is is an effort to reflect that feedback. And really, I think what I've learned from this experience being involved with IARPC over the years is that the broader research community, the input that you provide, it doesn't just improve plans, it really helps us make that link in partnership and in making the plans more actionable. In thinking about what how we've been responsive to, or how the federal agencies have been responsive in the development of Arctic research plans, and thinking about what that looks like. I can give you a couple of examples. Like I recall in the 2011-2012 planning process, we inadvertently forgot to include anything about land ice dynamics. And it was something that the public input review period caught. pointed that out, and we're like, oh yeah, we left out something that was really, really critical there. So we added a new section in that addressed that more directly. And in thinking about this most recent plan, we received some significant input about emphasizing food security and making sure there was links there in a couple of places. And so we added that emphasis in as well. We have also consistently heard from state of Alaska and also from others about the need for more actionable and applied research. And that has become a greater emphasis in the plan. So all this to say that these were not minor tweaks. They were really fundamental improvements and made plans more responsive to real Arctic challenges. And you can see that, I think, in the structure of the current plan that identifies priority areas that really guide more coordination and linking together and require different perspectives to come together, both perspectives from like real community research needs and researcher insights and moving things forward. So one of the things that what really makes input transformative is when it moves from like gathering feedback to genuine partnerships. And so while the plan itself is a federal document that's designed to guide federal coordination and actions, the research it enables can help enforce and develop real partnerships. And I think that's one of the great values of doing this type of work in having an Arctic research plan that is effective, that is responsive to rapidly changing conditions in the region, and that brings different knowledge systems together so that they can contribute to solutions and help decision-making that is happening on the ground. So the urgency of change in the Arctic means we can't leave out any, perspectives. We can't miss big things. So I want to encourage you that, if you're looking at sea ice dynamics, you're studying Arctic community health, or you're working on infrastructure challenges, that your insights help ensure that the plan addresses real needs and with real solutions. So as I'm wrapping up here, there's 2 questions that are in the Federal Register, and these, I'm just going to say them like in a slightly different way, because I think it's helpful to think about that, right? So some of the things that you can think about are like, where are the biggest gaps between what we know and what decision makers need to know? Whether you're an Arctic community leader, you're planning for infrastructure changes, you're a land manager adapting to new conditions, or you're a policymaker addressing something like Arctic security, right? Like, what is missing knowledge, and where is that creating a real problem for people? And so the second question is, what research questions, if answered, actually change how decisions are made? So it's helpful to understand what is not only interesting to study, but what gives people information that they can act on. So, so those are just some of the things that I encourage you to think about as you're considering input into the Arctic research plan. So I think this is a real great opportunity to help shape a plan that will guide federal research and investments over the next 5 years. And it's also an opportunity, I think, through IARPC, but also through the many others that are engaged in Arctic research, to create partnerships that ensure that the Arctic research enterprise serves communities and addresses the global implications of rapidly changing Arctic. So I'll stop there.
Thank you, Nikush. Yeah, I think it's really helpful to hear that, input is not only just informing sort of the content of the plan, but really challenging IARPC, challenging the drafters to set something up, set a structure up that is accessible, is flexible, is truly responsive. And, you know, it's not a plan that just lists out deliverables, but actually is developed to strengthen partnerships and pathways for collaboration in its execution. So I think it's helpful to kind of see that framing and not get stuck in the like, this is just a list of activities that we're going to undertake. It is, the intent is for it to be so much more than that. And that was how Nikushi led the drafting process last time, and something that we're hoping to retain in iterations of the plan moving forward. So thank you. All your work then, and for being here today now. Fantastic. Well, our final speaker for this section is Cheryl Rosa, the Deputy Director of the Arctic Research Commission. Cheryl, there you are as John Farrell. I know you've got some.
I didn't even notice that. That's pretty funny. I actually had to use his link because I hadn't gotten a link by email. So yeah, I'm not John Farrell, though John Farrell is on.
Who is
Thanks
he
so
on?
much. Thanks so much for having me. I'm kind of pinch hitting for John today. And so Britt, I sent my slides. Do you want me to just share my own?
Yeah, if you're able to, Cheryl, it should be set so that you can, but if you run into any issues, we do have them downloaded so we can.
Okay, let's go ahead and
Yes.
well, there was you guys don't really need to see this, but I've just got a few slides to run through and kind of in reference to one of the questions that were just posted in the chat. Consistent with the President's May 2025 implementation plan for Arctic research, the USARC has created a document that's aimed specifically at supporting the strengthening of national security. And this is a picture of the front page. There are 4 focus areas in this paper, and these sectors inform both domestic and foreign policy, ideally mutually reinforcing manner. And these things are often interlinked, and I'm going to speak about each of the 4 of these individually in the next slides. And I do want to indicate that this is separate from our goals report. This is a specific standalone paper that was published that is specifically aimed at national security. The first is military security. Of course, research is critical to strategic and tactical military advantage, especially as conditions evolve in the Arctic. We recommend several research efforts that are listed here on this slide, including enhanced study on modeling, the seafloor, the ionosphere, artificial intelligence. These are all lined out as areas of some of innovation, some of in need of additional study. The next area listed is community security, which involves basically Arctic-specific deep dives into risks and hazards. These can be made more precise through improved things like Arctic engineering, construction, and workforce development. We also emphasize the importance of a reliable and robust broadband network to underpin all of the things that are listed in this topic area. The third area is energy security. We recommend innovation in multiple technological and source areas that are well suited for Alaska. This includes things like geological hydrogen, methane hydrates, enhanced geothermal, microreactors, geological sequestration of CO2, and of course, more investigation into critical minerals and the resources that are available within our state, our Arctic. And then finally, the fourth area is economic security. This area is focused on fisheries. This situation in Alaska right now is highly changing. We have a lot of things that are happening, and we are encouraging research and infrastructure that allow continuous environmental monitoring to support the sustainable and prosperous fisheries that we've had historically in Alaska. Finally, the plan is for USARC to assess developments in these 4 sectors and identify evolving research needs to inform decision makers to help ensure a safe, secure, stable, and prosperous Arctic. That's just kind of a quick overview. And I think that the link was sent out with the agenda, but in case anybody can't find it, we are at arctic.gov, www.arctic.gov, and it is on our splash page. You should be able to access the document from there. I'm gonna stop sharing my screen. There we go. And yeah, we're happy to answer any questions on this. If between John and myself, we should be able to kind of, it's kind of a short document, but it definitely has some implications for things that are going on with national security right now.
Thank you, Cheryl. Yeah,
You're
there is a link to the report in the chat as well if folks want to take a read through. But yes, thank you, Cheryl, for being on and for walking us through that presentation. Just helpful to also kind of see almost the Arctic Research Plan placed in sort of the broader context of what's happening in the Arctic research community and what all will inform the plan, in addition to the input we get from agencies, the input we get from individuals and organizations. You know, it is meant to be very connected to all the broader shifts in the research landscape. So thank you.
You're welcome. And I will to kind of field one of the chat questions about alignment in terms of IARPC priorities and the BIP and USARC priorities. We do in kind of in the forming of these priorities, we precede IARPC. So there may not be specific alignment between what we say and what they say, but we try to inform IARPC for what they do. So this is an informing document.
Thank you. Well, I think with that, there's one more question about a link in the chat that we can address, but I want to make sure we have some time for our final set of remarks, and then we'll have a longer Q&A discussion portion. So I'm going to hand it over to Audrey Taylor.
Thanks, Tony, and thank you all for being here today. It's great to see so many folks joining us. I'm Dr. Audrey Taylor. I'm the Executive Director of ARCUS. We're a nonprofit organization representing a group of institutions dedicated to advancing Arctic science. And mostly what I want to talk to you guys about today is just sort of the how and the organizational side of this, and encourage folks to reach out beyond just yourselves in providing input. And this is coming from the fact that the ARCUS Consortium came together in the late 1980s to encourage support for Arctic research, specifically within NSF. And one of the key lessons from that history is that coalitions and consortiums of researchers and people interested in research can accomplish bigger things together than they can alone. And so that idea of leveraging networks and working collectively together is central to this idea of providing strong and valuable input into the new Arctic research plan. So we're fortunate that initiatives like the IARPC Secretariat and the Navigating the New Arctic Community Office are encouraging input. And it's wonderful to see all of you on the call today. But you know, we can't reach with the single call, we can't reach every network or researcher or Arctic community member. And so that means that the responsibility and the opportunity really for organizing a groundswell of input for the Arctic Research Plan falls to all of us in the broad Arctic research community. And if you're here today listening to this session, you obviously already care about the future of Arctic science, and that gives you the power and responsibility to take proactive action. And so we're not just speaking to you as individuals, we're speaking to members of a community of Arctic researchers, networks, organizations that can help shape that next national research plan, National Arctic Research Plan. This is coming from the perspective in part that if I'm sure everybody is aware, there have been big shifts in staffing at federal agencies and major changes underway at key agencies that support Arctic research, including the elimination of established divisions at NSF. This means that capacity and institutional memory have potentially been lost across these federal agencies, and therefore the need for proactive engagement from the research community has never been greater. What are the critical Arctic issues, needs, and challenges that policymakers need to address in this rapidly changing Arctic? What are the research questions that get at these needs? Who are the people and communities who need to be at the table to decide how to fill these gaps? And how do these questions align with federal Arctic priorities, such as those Cheryl highlighted in her presentation? So these are all the things that are going to come to the forefront in this process of collecting input and shaping this new research plan. And this is where the community really can play a major role. Your contributions can help answer these questions and shape the federal research agenda, while fostering collaboration that benefits both science and Arctic communities. But in this input period in particular, the key to a holistic process of providing input will be self-organization within the Arctic research community and the formation of partnerships that can help address some of these efforts to answer these critical needs as time goes on. And so what we'd love to, or what I'd love to encourage everyone to do is reach out to your networks, other researchers, communities, help identify representatives, host discussions, synthesize perspectives, help coordinate input. If you're faculty at a university, a concrete step is to identify other polar researchers at your institution, especially those outside your department. Invite them to provide input together so that you're having input at a level more broad than just your own lab or own research. This strengthens the perspectives that are submitted and helps the federal team understand the breadth of expertise at your individual institution. And it's also a unique opportunity potentially to engage students, to show them how research connects to policy, to help them find a space in this next and changing Arctic research community, and help inspire those who may not necessarily have the history to understand why this work in the research policy interface is really impactful. Similarly, if you're staff at a national lab or institute or part of a larger NGO or a coalition of researchers, if you can come together and submit comments for your overall organization, that is a really strong way to increase the breadth of some of the input that is being collected. So, you know, if we understand what our larger networks are doing and encourage those network leaders to act, then we're activating and coordinating this input at a level that helps boost the entire research community all at once, as well as all of the individual players. I'd also like to encourage everybody to work within IARPC collaboration teams. That's a key step to being involved. If the teams are open to anyone, you do have to join the IARPC collaboration site to learn more and jump into those calls and conversations. But I think everyone on this call would like to welcome everybody into those spaces because they've been created for the Arctic research community. So by engaging proactively, your insights as a network, a research group, a community, an institution can be integrated into planning and coordination across those agencies, across all of the federal agencies involved with the IARPC, rather than being submitted just as standalone comments. This organizing takes a lot of time, but the value is real. That coordinated input can elevate visibility, guide federal investment in science, and strengthen the connection across the Arctic research community, across the priorities that we're seeing as they change, and across the work that researchers and communities care most about to make sure that this work is impactful and actionable and matters to the people on the ground who are experiencing this rapidly changing Arctic. And I would also like to say, you know, we've heard a November 15th deadline for this first round of input. And if that feels incredibly soon, then it's also possible to submit input now, but also look for the first draft of the full research plan, the new Arctic research plan, when it comes out in the spring, and provide input at that level too. So I encourage everyone just to be involved, to not take this as just a passive opportunity to submit a comment about your own research that you care about, but take initiative as a community to try to have this maximum impact on funding and opportunities for this entire community, and amplify this opportunity as you can to provide input. So if you can help post the notice for input both now and in the spring through your networks and newsletters, social media, professional channels, that sort of thing, really get the word out to the collective community about how we can all be engaged. That would be fabulous to see. And we want everybody to feel inspired and committed to taking some action to provide input at this community level, because every action matters at this point. And I'll leave everyone with those comments. Happy to take any questions. And thank you all again for being here.
Thank you, Audrey, and to all of our speakers for your presentations and remarks today. I think at this point, we're actually going to shift gears and open things up for questions and comments from the audience. But before we do that, I just want to kind of set the stage so that everyone knows what to expect. So once again, this Q&A is designed to focus more on the process of developing the plan. So things like timelines and participation opportunities and decision-making steps, rather than actually providing input on the content of the plan itself today. We're not going to do that. But that said, if your professional communities are planning to develop input and there are opportunities for others to take part in that work, I encourage you to share that information in this chat so people who are interested can connect with you outside of today's session. As far as submitting your questions, the easiest thing is going to be if you put your questions directly in the chat. And if that question is meant for a particular agency or speaker, please put their name at the beginning of your question so we know who to direct that to. We'll also be stopping from time to time to take verbal questions. So if you'd like to ask something out loud, please use the raise hand function and we'll call on you. And then when it's your turn, just tell us your name and affiliation at the start and then ask the question. And then finally, if you do see a question in the chat that you would also like to see answered, you can give it a thumbs up. So there's a little emoji that you can click on, and that will help us understand where the broadest interests are. So with that, go ahead and start putting your questions in the chat. We'll take a few from there first, and then we'll pause to bring in anyone who has their hand raised. So Jenna, I'm going to go ahead and invite you to ask our first question.
Great, thank you, Rit. And quick introduction. Hi, everybody. My name is Jenna Votter. I'm the engagement lead with the Navigating the New Arctic Community Office. So our first question that I noted in the chat that has not already been responded to is asking if the November 15th deadline is for all comments or just one submitted via the Federal Register, i.e. can we still submit comments directly to Roberto or other mode beyond this deadline?
I can answer that. November 15th is the deadline for all public comments for this first round of public engagement and public comment.
Great, thank you, Serena.
Can I follow up really quick? Serena, maybe you can also clarify, just because I know this is being recorded and people might not have access to the chat later. There was a question about the November 15th versus the October 15th.
Yep, the October, sorry.
Oh, go ahead.
The October 15th deadline is an old deadline, and it was just a technical challenge in actually modifying the old FRN, but we extended the due date to November 15th, but had to issue a new Federal Register for it. So November 15th is the deadline. You can disregard the October 15th one. And the correct FRN link that has the November 15th deadline was also adjusted so you can submit your input directly via the FRN. There's like a little button you can press and you can just put your comment right in there, or you can email it or submit it in other ways, but it makes it a little bit easier that way as well.
I think another question we have in the chat is, to what extent is input from Arctic researchers or institutions outside the US welcome?
Yeah, I can also answer that one. We really encourage the international research community, individuals and organizations to submit input over the life of IARPC, a lot of work has been done to connect to international priorities, including ties to the International Polar Year that will pass. And, in the future, this next Arctic Research Plan will kind of lead right into the next International Polar Year, connecting to international partnerships and initiatives, and also to intertribal partnerships that extend across borders. So we really encourage input from everywhere. International is great. And again, we'll be hosting a session at the Arctic Circle Assembly meeting in October, and that's a great venue also to come and participate in a listening session in an international setting.
Great, thanks, Serena. Next question that I'm seeing that's getting a good number of thumbs up in the chat is, has there been outreach efforts to Indigenous communities throughout the Arctic to ensure their knowledge/concerns are considered in the research planning?
Yeah, that's a great question. Thank you. And I'll take a first shot at that. And then if Tracy, if you're here and want to add anything, feel free to jump in. So IARPC is doing several things to ensure that Indigenous input is received on the Arctic Research Plan. And so far, this has included targeted mail, sending mails and postcards and email campaign focused on reaching Indigenous and tribal groups across Alaska and the Alaskan Arctic. We are also participating in presentations and information sharing at key events and meetings. And Tracy, if you're on and would like to add anything, feel free to jump in.
And then just as a quick follow-on is Alaska Federation of Natives, they're meeting one of those events.
Yeah, that's it. I'll defer to Tracy on that.
Okay, yes, AFN is one of those events. And I think Serena pretty much has summed it up. If anyone is interested in having a presentation done at an upcoming meeting, we're happy to do that as well. I've been calling folks up individually and offering that. I think certainly our ability and our capacity for outreach is significantly diminished than in prior instances where we've done outreach, but we're trying to do as robust of a process as possible. And if anyone has suggestions, we're happy to take them.
Thanks, Tracy. I think, Paul, you've had your hand up for quite some time. Would you like to go ahead and switch on your mic and ask your question?
Sure. If you make me a video, you can see me as well. Thank you, everybody. I guess it's a pregnant question. The ARCUS is co-sponsoring this discussion today. And as I understand it, tomorrow is a farewell for ARCUS, which means a significant feature of dialogue, open dialogue across the community is going to change. With appreciation to IARPC for the sessions that were identified, the listening sessions and the discussions, will IARPC take up the slack after the November deadline to assist in robust community discussions as ARCUS has done for these past, 30 years, 35 years? So it's a question perhaps those with IARPC and Larry and Matt and others, Matthew can address, because there's a significant change in the opportunity for the Arctic community across the nation to speak with each other in the absence of ARCUS.
Do you mind terribly if I take that? So, so thanks, Paul. We all love and appreciate ARCUS, and really are in great sadness to see it go. It's done a wonderful job for us over the past many decades, and it's been a huge part of the advances that we've made in Arctic research for a long time, and just been incredibly helpful. But the role of IARPC is not to pick up the duties that ARCUS has had. So that's going to be impossible for ARCUS to do. I'm sorry, that's going to be impossible for IARPC to do. I do hope that the efforts that ARCUS have invested are distributed among the community, and all of us can together help fill that void. But it is, at this point, it's a huge hole how that's going to be filled. But today we are, as you mentioned, we are having a meeting, a community meeting tomorrow about ARCUS, and so tomorrow is the time to thank ARCUS, and today is the time to look to the how to develop the next Arctic research plan. So thanks for that question, though.
All right, next question from the chat. Is there a specific IARPC collaboration for those who specialize in area studies and security studies? Given the increased emphasis on security, it would seem to make sense if not.
Yeah, I can take a first stab at answering that. Security, we don't have a specific team that is focused solely on security. The theme of security, well, let me backtrack. Security is a policy driver. So we have these key policy drivers that inform the entire Arctic research plan and kind of inform its structure, its teams, its content. And security is one of our 4 key policy drivers, and you can read more about that in the Arctic research plan itself. But at a high level, this policy driver focuses on strengthening regional, national, and international safety, as well as enhancing risk management and emergency preparedness. So security as a theme and as a driver permeates throughout the Arctic research plan, and you can find deliverables and kind of key work associated with security across our different teams. And as it continues to grow in importance, like that will likely be reflected in updates and changes. And you can also bring, our collaboration teams host open public meetings that are sort of centered around the Arctic research plan, but also often focus on new and emerging topics. So those topics can kind of come through that way as well. Does that answer your question?
All right, I think we have another question in the chat that is probably directed towards Cheryl. She's curious to know more, or this person is curious to know more about the role of US ARC and the US ARC policy priorities within IARPC.
Sorry, guys. Can you hear me okay? I was having trouble getting off mute. So we are technically not part of IARPC. We participate in IARPC, but our goals report and recommendations that we make through the Arctic Research Commission precede the IARPC 5-year plan process. And the process of us coming up with ideas that come from our commissioners is meant to inform the process that IARPC undertakes, if that helps.
This is Nakush, and I can briefly add to that. It's been the case in all the previous plans that I have been involved with, Arctic research plans, that we've looked to the most recent documents from USARC or the goals report, and as Cheryl has noted, we've used that as one of the inputs that guides the development of the Arctic research plan. So there is history and a process in place that has linked those two, even though, as someone pointed out, they're not directly, you don't always see them like lining up directly. We were both entities, USARC and IARPC, that were created through the Arctic Research and Policy Act of 1984.
All right, thank you. Our next question, over the past several years, we've seen significant progress in advancing Indigenous knowledge and science together through co-production of knowledge. At Inuit Circumpolar Council, Alaska, we are currently focused on moving this process from theory to practice. Can you comment on how the future of US Arctic research is continuing to advance this in research planning, funding, design, and ultimately to inform decision-making.
Is there a specific person that question's for? Or?
There is not listed, but the person who put that question in the chat. Oh, I'm sorry, Matt, I saw that you raised your hand. Go ahead.
Well, this is a partial response. I mean, I would agree that those are very important priorities to have highlighted for the next Arctic Research Plan. I think they were ones that were embedded in the current plan, that are embedded in the current plan. I'll put in a plug for another session that we're hosting next week on September 25th. It's an input session specifically for those who've participated in some form or are interested in the type of research that was done through the Navigating the New Arctic initiative that NSF has funded over the last many years, that has funded a number of projects and partners to both advance but also consider practice within knowledge co-production research. And I think that'll be a really good opportunity to bring people together to think about how to formulate input to kind of address the really important point that Verne raises here.
This is
I don't mean at all to say that NNA Navigating the Arctic is the only example of co-production of knowledge research, but I think it is. It has been in recent years a critical mass of people that are thinking about this and trying to move from theory to practice.
Thanks, Matt. This is Nakush. Thanks, Renee, for your comment. I really appreciate you raising that. And I think I'm glad Matt pointed out that the principles you raised around co-creation, co-production, working together, were things that were very much embedded and woven into the fabric of the current plan. And so if those are things that my own personal opinion is that if those are things that you want to see continue, those are things that would be helpful to raise through comments.
All right, I think we have one more question directed again towards Cheryl. We have a question asking why the US ARC report did not articulate a priority area for environmental security. Where does environmental security fit within the priority areas moving forward?
Might actually toss that to John Farrell. I just returned from a detail and I was not there for the development of this latest report. I know that the 4 priorities that have been chosen were chosen as the top 4. And perhaps our Commissioner Nakush Carlo could also give some input on the development and kind of how these top 4 were chosen and if environmental does fit well under one or if it's something else that would be taken up at another time.
I can start. I don't know if John will chime in. Yes, so one of the other hats I wear is as a commissioner to the U.S. Arctic Research Commission. And what I will say about environmental security is that was really the foundation and starting point for all of the others. So it's sort of woven in across each of the highlighted security areas that we included. So those 4. I think another area you could point to is like economic security. We focused on fisheries, but also recognized that like economic security is part of the other security areas as well. So it's really this sort of interwoven fabric, and that the environmental security is really a sort of underpins everything. So hopefully that is helpful.
Thanks, Nakush.
We've been taking questions from the chat, but I did want to just pause to see if anyone wanted to ask a question verbally. So if you do have a question that you were holding off until we were inviting you to unmute, go ahead and raise your hand and we can answer those questions now. If not, we'll go ahead and move on to a couple more questions coming through in the chat. So we have one here that asks, has anyone done a literature search on past research on fisheries in Alaska? So sure, a number of people have done that. So we might have, if anyone wants to respond to that question in the chat for Adelheid, go ahead and do that. I'm going to move on to another. I think we just have some comments going on there, suggesting using radio for outreach in remote areas and social mail.
We still have about 10 more minutes for questions if folks would like to continue putting those in the chat.
I see Jessica, you have your hand raised. Please feel free to go ahead and ask your question aloud.
Cool. Hi, Oyana. I'm calling in from home. My toddler is coming down with something again. Yay, eating off the floor. But one of my questions is kind of similar to Renee's question. I noticed, or I heard that mail, email, and print were utilized. If you were trying to reach anyone in Chefornik, that would be a terrible way to reach them, because most of the mail doesn't get opened if it doesn't look like a bill or something you've been expecting. And for engagement, yeah, that you get a very small number of people responding to physical mail sent out. Maybe the tribe will read it and then they'll just be like, okay, cool, next letter. Because they'll receive like 100 letters and they'll have to read them at the tribal meetings. And usually by then it's 11 o'clock at night and everyone's tired. So just an FYI, if you're like, why is no one responding to the mail we're sending? It's because of that. Like Adelheid Herman, she made this really wonderful document about the tribal landscape and what tribal communities or tribal offices have to manage daily. It was pretty accurate. Shoot, I lost my train of thought. But my question is, like, what other outreach are you planning before the deadline? Oyana.
Thank you, Jessica. So I think we've heard about IARPC participating in a few conferences and events. Tracy or Serena, do you want to talk more a little bit about that?
Yeah, yes, sure. Well, it's good to get the feedback on the physical mail. Like that's part of our attempt to cover all the bases, both we're doing email, we're doing physical mail, and hopefully the mailer we're sending out is a colorful postcard, nothing to open, and a QR code there. So maybe that'll catch a little bit more attention. But yeah, in addition to that, we're going to be at AFN and sitting at a table, and we're planning to have the capacity to accept input then and there, and also information on how people can provide input. But yeah, and so we followed up on our email communications with tribal offices by calling not each individual tribe directly, but the regional consortiums, and offering additional information and then opportunity for us to present at an upcoming meeting. And we've made clear that we're flexible in terms of timing, just so that we can make sure that all the key players are there, and that may not necessarily be business hours. But yeah, again, we haven't done radio. I really like that suggestion, and I have a list of radio stations that I can submit. What do you call those things? PR notices to. But yeah, but thank you for your feedback, and I welcome more.
Great. Thank you, Tracy. And thank you, Jessica, for all that helpful input. Okay, one other question just came into the chat. Could we expect to see future funding opportunities from NSF or other federal agencies concerning Arctic research? I don't know that we have anyone here specifically from NSF who is able to answer that, but I didn't know if anyone else had some comments on that. Okay. Seems like maybe that's a, oh, Larry,
Actually,
did you want to
yeah,
comment?
maybe I'll jump in. So the state of federal funding agencies is a little bit of in turmoil right now, and so it's impossible for anybody to project on that. However, what we can say is that this is a good opportunity to emphasize needs, and if those needs and priorities are put forward, that also provides NSF with further justification for addressing those needs. And so, although we can't and absolutely respond positively to your question, we can say that there's a good approach to helping NSF and helping the Arctic research community address these questions. Put it out there and promote and push for these efforts to address them.
I can add something related. This is Nakush. Just in terms of I think part of this question is also how is this process that we're talking about feedback into IARPC in the development of the Arctic research plan? How does that connect to other federal Arctic efforts? And I think what I've observed over the years is that the Arctic research plan really provides a foundation, a scientific foundation for other broader things that are Arctic related, that are developed within the federal government. So things like the National Strategy for the Arctic region, the Arctic Executive Steering Committee committee's work. So when you put input in, I think there are some about research priorities. I think there are some ripple effects there through policy decisions to from everything from infrastructure investment to international cooperation. So there are some compounding impacts. So that's one of the things that I think is really important about highlighting the research needs that as you see them from your different community perspectives.
Okay, I'm not seeing any further questions in the chat at the moment, so I'm putting an email plan at iarpiccollaborations.org in the chat. So if someone has a question that comes to them after the meeting today, that's a good place to direct those inquiries. I think maybe we'll hand things back to Matthew to say a few closing remarks today.
Thank you, Britt. And I wanted to again thank all of our speakers and those who are here today to offer information about the process and to answer many of the great questions that we received. I would remind everyone to a slide that Serena shared that showed those 16 federal agencies that implement the National Plan for Arctic Research. It's not just NSF, it's not just NASA or NOAA, it's a whole host. And I think that comes back to some of the the guidance that Larry provided, and along with Nakush, to be very specific, concise about the type of input you provide, and when possible, note more specifically as to who that input is really intended for, so that it can be actionable. And then I think Audrey offered some really great perspectives on how we must consider coming together as a community at this time within our own communities and our networks, and those that we work with to formulate input together. I think that makes it stronger and it carries more weight. There will be opportunities coming up in the next several weeks to provide input within more focused discussions. I'm going to share a few links that have already been shared in the chat, but I'm going to repost those. This first link that I'm sharing is to the IARPC page that has the list of sessions coming up. Those are ones that will be focused on data management technology, another on observing and modeling, community resilience and health, permafrost, risk management and hazard mitigation, and then lastly, one on Arctic system interactions. Those are intended to be opportunities to engage in more depth discussion, to provide input, and to think more specifically about the input that you may want to provide as an individual or with an organization or a network. And then also, I will be posting here in the chat a link to register for the session that I gave a plug for earlier. The Navigating the New Arctic Community Office is going to be hosting an event next week on the 25th that's focused on those who have participated in the NNA initiative, again, to be discussing the type of input that would be helpful to provide to this process. So with that, I do want to acknowledge everyone that gave your time today. I'm heartened to see so many people here thinking about this, and hopefully we collectively can ensure that we are not only commenting on the current plan, as you know, as Larry said, of what's working well, what needs to be maybe adapted, what's missing, but really thinking to the current moment and to the future on the type of research priorities that we need to be pushing. So thank you again to everyone, and thank you specifically to IARPC and for ARCUS for co-hosting this with us, Jenna and I from the Navigating the New Arctic Community Office. It's great to see everyone, and again, recall that this will be recorded, and so you can share this recording with your colleagues if they are looking for this information as well. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks all.
Thanks, everyone. Great to see everyone.